modeling the speciation and extinction of species seen as elementary particles, and also introduced microscopic models, bottom-up models of speciation, and how information could be extracted from the mere phylogeny about the process of diversification. And today I would like to mix the two kinds of lectures, the two topics of the two lectures, by considering gene trees, but now individuals are sampled in different species. I want to explain how gene trees at different loci are coupled, either using the species tree or not. So let me go back to these phylogenies. So here an example of a phylogenetic tree of mammals. And so I didn't mention some problems that you can go through when you try to analyze these phylogenies and use them to infer how the diversification process has occurred during the past. And the first class of problems is statistical problems of two kinds: false positive associations. For example, there have been attempts of trying to see if these methods could detect an association between the speciation and extinction rates on the one side, and on the other side a trait which would be fake, like for example the number of letters in the species name. And indeed these methods would detect an association. So that's the first class of problem, false positive associations. And the second class is the problems of identifiability, where for different scenarios of time variation of the diversification rate, you get the same likelihood of the reconstructed tree of the phylogeny. The second class of problems that you can go through is that phylogenies are just not big data. It's just one tree. And so you may think that if you want to get information on the past of the diversification process, you need more signal. So people try to get more signal either from fossils or from genomes, and that's this second topic that I will deal with now. So here on the cartoon you can see one species tree, like a toy tree with three species. You may remember from lecture 1 that gene trees could be inferred by comparing the sequences, with the idea that sequences that have a distant time to most recent common ancestor are more different from each other. And so there are two possibilities. So the first possibility is that the gene trees, as you can see here, the green and the orange lineage have the same topology, meaning that B and C are more closely related than to A. And so if all gene trees have the same topology, then it's simple. You may conclude that this topology is the topology of the species tree, okay? But the problem is that there's a second possibility, is that the gene trees do not all have the same tree shape, and I'm not even speaking of the node depths. As you can see here, with this example of a deep coalescence. So the deep coalescence means that you see the orange lineages have not coalesced during the whole mother edge to B and C. And so then when they are left in the mother edge to A, B, and C, the root edge, then any coalescence can occur. And this is known as incomplete lineage sorting. So the question is whether we can exploit the signal coming from this whole diversity of gene trees to understand in more depth the diversification process. So there are two kinds of causes for the discrepancy between gene trees. The first, I just introduced it, it's deep coalescences, which are due to the intrinsic randomness of the coalescence process. It can also be due to spatial structure. This is something I mentioned during lecture 1. The fact that here not shown on the picture, you may imagine that actually the two lineages ancestral to B and C are trapped in two different geographically separated populations, and so cannot coalesce because the two populations do not interbreed. So the second class of cause for this discrepancy is shallow coalescences, and these shallow coalescences, as you can see on the picture, can be due to gene flow between species. The fact that here the ancestral species to A and B have exchanged material at some point in time, so that A and B are more closely related if you trust this pink gene rather than the orange gene just before. Actually, you might think that gene flow between species contradicts the very definition of species that are not able to interbreed, but recently there has been a wealth of evidence rising showing that many species, even species which are quite distantly related, do interbreed, and you can see in this review paper in Science 4 years ago, showing on the picture lots of well-known hybrids, like for example on the bottom of the picture, hybrids between grizzly bears and polar bears. And so, in the first part of the talk today, I will talk about examples where gene trees are coupled by the species tree and the so-called multi-species coalescent, which is widely used by evolutionary biologists. And I will introduce some other kind of what I call nested coalescence, where the gene tree is always included in the species tree, as on the first picture. And then I will introduce models allowing for dynamic spatial structure and then gene flow between species. And finally, I would like to say a word about the applications that were announced in the abstract, but I won't have much time, so I think I will only deal with the first question, talking about how nested coalescence come down from infinity, a purely mathematical question. So what about nested coalescence? First, I would like to introduce what is the multi-species coalescence, a way of coupling gene trees in a very simple fashion. The idea is to start from the species tree, as you can see on the cartoon. So the species tree is either fixed or random. So it can be first generated by a birth-death process or Kingman's coalescent. Sometimes it's actually the unknown to be inferred. The gene trees are known thanks to the sequences, and the species tree has to be inferred under this model. And conditional on the species tree, the gene trees are assumed to be independent coalescents, but that can only coalesce when the lineages are inside the same tube, the same pipe of the species tree. Sometimes you can allow for occasional gene flow or hybridization events in the species tree, but that's pretty rare. Notice that in this model, there is no explicit modeling of physical linkage. The fact that you're looking at the ancestry of genes that might be located at neighboring locations on the genome. Here we assume that there's no recombination, like if genes were all on different chromosomes. And so here, disagreements between gene trees are, except for in the case when you allow for gene flow, are mainly due to the randomness of the coalescent process, as you can see in the case of the dark blue gene 4. As an example, if the species tree is given by Kingman's coalescent, then the pair of trees given by the gene tree and the species tree is called the nested Kingman coalescent, or simply Kingman and Kingman, as you can see on this picture, where in pink you can see, so now time flows from left to right. In pink you can see the species, you can see two coalescences between species, and all the black lineages are gene trees, and you can see all the coalescences occurring between black lineages only if they lie inside the same species. So before I introduce a generalization of the multi-species coalescent, I need to introduce a generalization to the Kingman coalescent. So there are various generalizations, but the main one is called the lambda coalescent. The lambda coalescent is a Markov process, pi sub n of t, valued in the partition of 1n as the Kingman coalescent. And you have to make several assumptions. The first is that it's a coalescent, so it's non-decreasing, meaning that partitions that get coarser and coarser with time until you get to the absorbing point where you have the whole 1n as a state. It's assumed to be exchangeable, simply consistent, meaning that if you look at pi n plus 1 of t, and you restrict this partition to the first n integer, that meaning like you remove n plus 1, you're left with a partition which has the same distribution as pi n. And it is assumed that there is only one merger at a time. A merger is when you have a subset of blocks that coagulate together into one new single new block. And here we assume that we can't have multiple mergers at the same time, okay? So a merger can be more than binary, more than two blocks coagulating at the same time, but no multiple mergers. So it has been shown by Sagitov and Muller and others that these coalescence can be characterized thanks to a finite measure called lambda, hence the name of the lambda coalescent. And if lambda doesn't charge 0, you can define nu of dx as on the slide, and construct the process from a Poisson point process of intensity dt d nu as follows. So at each atom Tx of the Poisson point process, T is time and X is a real number between 0 and 1, you will paint each block of Pn of T minus independently with the same probability X. And you merge all the blocks that you have painted into one single block, okay? And this way you get all the possible lambda coalescence, satisfying the three properties that I mentioned earlier. Notice that a partition into B blocks sees a given subset of K blocks merge at a rate equal to lambda BK, that can be written thanks to the measure nu or thanks to the measure lambda. If you look at the second expression written in terms of lambda, you see that this rate is 0 only if K is equal to 2. And in this case, when lambda equals delta 0, you're left with you recover the Kingman coalescent. So now we'll deal with nested coalescence. So nested coalescence describes the coagulation dynamics of genes contained in species. So you assume that in terms of modeling, that you sample DNA at the same locus in each individual, labeled 1n, for example, in different species. And you define pi g, the partition valued process that describes the coalescence of genes, and pi s, the coalescence of species, exactly as is written just below. Now, remember that we want to model gene trees inside a species tree in the absence of gene flow, so that the gene lineages can coalesce only if they belong to the same species. That means that a nested coalescent is a partition, is a process valued in pairs of partitions, but one is always finer than the other. Okay, so pi g is always finer than pi s. And we will say that the nested coalescent is simple if both pi g and pi s see only one merger at a time. Okay, exactly as in the lambda coalescent. But now the difference is that you might have at the same time a merger in pi g and a merger in pi s. All right? So you never have multiple mergers. You always have one merger at a time, but at the same time you may have a merger in pi g and a merger in pi s. So in the paper that is mentioned here, we have, among other things, characterized all simple nested coalescence by 3 types of mechanisms. The first type of mechanism is a lambda coalescent type for species during which genes do nothing. Okay?
Well, I have a question, if I may interject,
Yeah.
regarding the number of species that can partake in the nested coalescing process. Is there any limit?
Sorry?
In other words, or this is just a model, right? But is there any limit, like any kind of constraint that is being considered?
No, there's no limit. No limit. There's no restriction. So actually all species can coalesce together. For example, if here with this mechanism, you draw an atom of lambda, which is equal to 1, it means that you paint all species, and so all species coalesce together at the same time. Okay? The second type of mechanism is the same, but independently in each species, the genes can undergo lambda coalescent type events according to some common measure lambda sub g, during which the species do nothing. And then you have the simultaneous merger for species and genes. So here is how it goes. there is a measure nu GS on 0,1 times M1 of 0,1, where M1 is the space of probability measures on 0,1, driving simultaneous coalescence of genes and species according to the following rule. So at each atom x mu of a Poisson point process with intensity dt d nu, so recall that x, so sorry, it should be Tx mu. So T is the jump time, x is a probability, and mu is a probability measure on 0, 1. At such a time, you paint each species block independently with probability x, exactly as in the lambda coalescence. And now for each painted species block I, you will independently draw a random variable yi according to the same probability measure mu. And now conditional on yi, you paint each gene block of species I independently with this probability yi. And now, of course, you have all guessed that you merge all painted species blocks together, and you merge all painted gene blocks together. So that's for simultaneous merging of species and genes. And that's the general case for simple nested coalescence. We have studied a bunch of properties of this coalescence in this paper, and in two accompanying papers, like part of the authors here and myself and Emmanuel Scherzer and myself have studied how these nested coalescence can come down from infinity, and I will say a word about that at the end of the lecture. Also note that Jean-Gilles Duchamp, who has contributed a lot to this paper and was a PhD student until 9 months ago, who is now a maître de conférence at the University of Besançon, has also written another paper on nested fragmentations using quite different techniques. So here, what did we have? We have like a very general mathematical result characterizing the coupling between one gene tree and one species tree, right? So it's two trees that are nested into the other. One is nested into the other. So now what happens when you consider several gene trees at the same time? So one example is the multi-species coalescence. But in the multi-species coalescence, speciation events are instantaneous, and gene trees are shaped by the species tree, right? Conditional on the species tree, the gene trees can coalesce independently, provided that the lineages are in the same species. In reality, speciation takes time, something that we said in the last lecture, and it is a byproduct of genetic differentiation, right? It's because individuals from the same species or population from the same species progressively differentiate genetically that the species where they belong splits into two, right? It's not the other way around. So we have to shift to models where the gene tree shape the species tree and not like in the multi-species coalescence. Also recall that gene flow and or spatial structure may be important causes of gene tree disagreement. So we need models of gene trees acknowledging that speciation takes place in a spatially dynamic context, which will be the topic of model 1, or that species do exchange genes continuously and not at some specific time points, like in the few generalizations of the multi-species coalescence that exist. And it will be the topic of models 2 and 3. So the assumptions that I will make in the three models are different, but also the objects that I will treat are different. So let me be clear from the start that for these three models, in model 1, I will just look at one locus. Okay, so I will only be interested in one genealogy when you sample n individuals in a spatially dynamic context. So for example, on the cartoon on the right, it would be saying that you look at, for example, for n equals 2, you look at the blue gene. Okay. In model 2, I will consider several loci, but I will only consider one genome which is sampled. So actually, there will be no tree, no gene tree, but I will just be interested in how the gene lineages are sorted in different species, as if on the cartoon you only look at the genome on the right and its ancestry. In model 3, I will consider several loci and n genomes sampled, and the picture will basically what you see on the right. So let's go for model 1 with a dynamic spatial structure. So the idea here will be to use the context of what is called Perry-Patrick speciation. If you remember, last week I talked about allopatrick speciation, where a large population will split into two geographically isolated populations, and as a byproduct of genetic differentiation due to local adaptation, these two populations will differentiate sufficiently to form different species. Perry-Patrick speciation is pretty much the same, but with the idea that you start with one main population surrounded by small, what are called peripheral isolates. And these isolates are supposed to dwell or to inhabit marginal environmental conditions, possibly causing speciation due to local adaptation. And so here the assumptions basically mimic this cartoon of one main population surrounded by small colonies. So the main population will assume to have size capital N, surrounded by Xi, where Xi is stochastically varying through time, Xi small colonies, each of size epsilon times N. And so the idea throughout this section will be that N goes to infinity, epsilon N goes to 0, sorry, epsilon sub N goes to 0, but epsilon times N goes to infinity, right? So the size of the colonies is large, but it's negligible compared to the size of the main population. Inside each population, there will be birth deaths occurring at rate 1, like in the Moran model. So you have simultaneous birth and death so as to keep the size of populations constant. And the small colonies will see their number vary. They will emerge from colonization events called fission and disappear by merging with the main population, fusion. So here you see a nice animation. So just forget about the text on this new slide. Forget about the text and just look at this very nice animation here. So on the left, you see a fission event where an individual sees a new colony. And on the right, you see merging of a colony with the main population with simultaneous deaths so as to keep the size of the main population constant.
In the picture on the right, the crosses on the points, are they being killed, or those are the marked points that came?
At each fusion event, you have to kill a certain number.
Oh, okay, because you keep the population fixed.
Yeah, exactly. And so what we will assume is very simple. As for fission, each individual independently sees the new colony, and the rate will be of the order of 1 over epsilon n squared. You will see y, with a multiplying factor which depends on whether the individual comes from a colony or from the main population. But if you want, you can take them equal. And as for fusion, you will assume that each colony independently merges with the main population at a rate which increases like a power of the total number of colonies, a phenomenon which is known as density dependence, and which is meant to model competition for space or for resources between the small colonies. Okay. And so with these parameters, what we obtained with Chun Hama, who was a postdoc at the time in the SMILE group, is that in the asymptotic regime that I just described, epsilon times Xi, where Xi is the number of colonies, converges in a very classical Etienne-Kurtz type theorem towards the solution x of t to a differential equation, which is written on the right. And everything was designed so as to have one single globally stable equilibrium kappa solution to theta plus beta kappa minus gamma kappa to the alpha equals 0. And so at equilibrium, what you get is that the total number of colonies converges. It's of the order of kappa over epsilon, so that the total number of individuals in colonies as compared to inside the main population is kappa times capital N. So it's the same order of magnitude, it's constant, and the fraction of the biomass in main population versus in colonies is 1 over 1 plus kappa. Okay, so you have this picture where at equilibrium you have the same order of magnitude of individuals outside the main population and inside the main population, but of course there is a flow between the two kinds of populations which are ongoing. So if you compute the fission and fusion rates, of course, they are equal at equilibrium, and they are of the order of 1 over n epsilon, which is the size, n times epsilon, the size of a colony. And so now we'll be interested in the coalescent that is produced by this model. So it's very simple. You draw individuals from the main population, for example, maybe one from each colony or something like this. And then you trace back the lineages of these individuals through time. Now, because the colonies are too small, you will never encounter two green lineages, lineages ancestral to the sample in the same colony. On the contrary, you will sometimes encounter gene lineages commonly inhabiting the main population, and so you will see coalescences inside the main population. And of course, the gene lineages can travel from colony to main population according to the fusion and fission events. Okay, and so to be precise, here's the result that we got. So in the asymptotic regime, the genealogy of a sample only depends on which lineages are inner, meaning they are in the main population, or outer, meaning they are in some colony. We don't care about whether they are in different or same colonies, because it never happens, they're always in different colonies. And so now in backward time, when you accelerate time by a factor n, you get the usual Kingman coalescent inside the main population. So inner lineages, the blue lineages on the cartoon, coalesce at rate 1 per pair. And now you can turn from inner to outer at the following rate. So you get from in to out at a rate which is equal to the fusion rate times the probability that at a fusion rate, the lineage that you're following is taken in the fusion, and you get a rate which is big of 1. And the same kind of reasoning for the rate at which you go from out to in is the total fission rate times 1 over the total number of colonies. The fission rate, sorry, here the fission rate is the fission from the main population. And basically what you get is the following, is the two-state coalescent emerging from this spatially dynamic model where small populations bud from and merge with the main population, as you can see on the cartoon. Simple two-state coalescent where you have active and inactive lineages. The active can coalesce and the inactive cannot. So the perspective to this model, of course, is to embed it in a speciation framework where each species consists in one main population surrounded by colonies, and you have several copies of these systems. But you need to have new species with main populations and small colonies spontaneously emerge from that system. And actually, we didn't find a way of doing that which is biologically realistic. And so we're stuck here with this class of models with Chunhua, but I would be interested if you have any ideas to do that. I would like to emphasize that this active-inactive coalescent also arises in models of seed banks where the seeds can be active or dormant. And this has led to a lot of papers around Jochen Blatt and his collaborators, among which this paper in Annals of Applied Probability, where it is shown, for example, that for a sample of n individuals, when the size of the sample increases, the time to the most recent common ancestor is of the order of log n. So basically, this means that log n, since for all practical purposes it's actually a constant, the time to the most recent common ancestor is not really does not really go to infinity, so that this coalescent almost comes down from infinity. And so this class of models is suspected to be unable to account for the deep coalescences that we think are one of the causes for discrepancy between gene trees. And so from now on, I will focus on the other cause, the gene flow that are causing more shallow coalescences than expected in a multi-species coalescent. So there's two models, but first I have to introduce what we expect in these models with gene flow. So recall that multi-species coalescence yields a nice way of coupling gene trees, right? Because you have many gene trees, they cannot be independent because they share at least partially some evolutionary history. Recombination was a way of doing that in the ancestral recombination graph. The multi-species coalescence is a way of doing that by assuming that the conditional on the tree, the gene trees are independent. But now in models with gene flow, there will be several species that are ancestral to a genome in the sense that it carries a subset of the ancestral gene lineages, okay? Because your genes will travel into different species. When you follow the ancestral species to one single genome, you will find several ancestral species. And so this means that there's no such thing as a mother-daughter species relationship, and so there's no species tree. So we can't really use the species tree in order to couple the gene trees. But of course, as I said, as in the ancestral recombination graph, if you follow back in time the genes ancestral to one sample genome, one object of interest is the partition pi n of t of 1n induced by the relation lying in the same species or not. As in the ARG, it was lying in the same individual or not. Okay, so we had this partitioning process that described blocks which are lineages that are in the same individual, and now it will be lineages that are in the same species. So what we would like to know if how this process is how this process behaves as t goes backward in time, and especially we don't want to have too many ancestral species as n grows. Just for the math side of it, by sampling consistency, note that there is a projective limit to pi n called pi infinity, which is an exchangeable partition of the integers, such that pi n can be seen as pi infinity, or has the same law, sorry, as pi infinity restricted to the first n integers. And so what is nice is that exchangeable partitions have a general representation due to the Kingman definitive theorem, saying that they have what is called block frequencies, the beta j's, which form a subprobability. Okay, so the beta j's, beta 1, beta 2, beta 3, etc., are positive real numbers that are summable, but the sum is smaller than or equal to 1. Okay, and so what you do is that you paint each integer in color j with probability beta j, and all the integers which have the same color as on this cartoon, you put them in the same block. And now, if the sum of the beta j's is not equal to 1, then you have a remaining gray interval as on the cartoon with length d equal to 1 minus the sum. And then all the integers which fall into this interval, you paint them in distinct color. So you get singletons, so-called dust. Okay? Something that I will briefly mention in the following, but I think it's a nice result to mention at this point. So the second model is the first model with gene flow, is a model of speciation with introgression that we have studied with Félix Foutel-Rodier and his co-supervisor Emmanuel Scherzer. You will hear about Félix Foutel-Rodier in another lecture by Alison Etheridge in a few weeks. So the model goes as follows. So you have a model in forward time, and in backward time, I will look at the ancestral partition. So you start with n monomorphic species, meaning that you don't consider the polymorphism inside the species, and so you only have to keep track of one genome of n genes inside each species. And exactly as in the models that I introduced last week, you assume that the species undergo an extinction recolonization type of model, like the Moran model, where at rate 1 per pair, each species kills another species and replaces it by a copy of the genome that it contains, exactly as on the picture here. You see, let's say, the second type of event, which is highlighted. And now we add introgression events. So introgression events mean that you will introduce some genetic material in some other species, And so how do we do that? Each gene lineage, one N, at rate C, can replicate and move from one species to another, and then replace its homologous copy in the target species. As you can see, for the blue lineage on the left and for the green lineage on the right. Okay, so you see this sole lineage that decides to replicate and move into another species. Okay, that's meant to model gene flow between species. And now in backward time, you look at the ancestry of one sample genome. Okay, so you look at the genome on the right, and you follow its ancestry from right to left. When you do that, you get this, you're following actually a partition induced by the relation lying in the same species that I introduced in the previous slide. Of course, you have these coalescent events, which are the dual to the colonization event in forward time, so that each pair of blocks coalesces at rate 1. And the dual to introgression will be the fact that, for example, the green lineage on the right will leave its block and land in another species. And because n is assumed to go to infinity, it will always land in a species which is empty, which contains no other ancestral material from the sample genome. Okay, so it's called erosion. It's one singleton. It's or let's say one integer in each block, which decides on its own at rate C to form a new singleton. Okay, and so the resulting process is known as Kingman's coalescent with erosion. And thanks to the skill of Félix Foutel-Rodier, we managed to get some nice results on the stationary state of this process. So first, recall that the number of blocks at time t is the number of ancestral species. Okay, it's the number of species that contribute to the genome that you have sampled at present time. Okay, and now recall that this number of blocks in the Kingman coalescent with erosion, the backward time picture, goes from k to k minus 1 at rate k choose 2. That's for coalescences. And each time you have an erosion, you add 1 to the number of blocks. Okay, so it goes at k from k to k plus 1 at rate equal to c times the number of integers which are not already in the form of a singleton. But if we neglect these, say it's Cn, and when you equal the two rates, you find that the number of blocks is of the order of square root of n. Okay, it's actually square root of 2Cn. Now look at the picture on the right. The picture on the right tells you how clusters are formed from singletons. The singletons arise at the black dots. Okay, we don't know from where, and they coalesce. And as they coalesce, they form new blocks, right? And so the origin of each block that is present at present time can be traced back to its singletons. If you look at this picture, you see a tree, right? You see a tree where, reversing time, each birth corresponds to a coalescence, and each death corresponds to an erosion, a new singleton arising in the system. Okay? So now actually this process is reversible, and when you reverse time and you compute the birth and death rates of these particles that you can see on the cartoon on the right, when there are k particles present in the system, each particles give birth at rate Cn over k and dies at rate k minus 1 over 2. And if you replace k by the number of blocks predicted by the previous rule of thumb, you find that the two rates are equal. And now, since the size of the block is exactly equal to the number of its singletons, it's equal to the number of deaths in the trees that you see on the right. And the number of deaths is the total progeny, is also the number of births. And so it's the total progeny of this birth-death process that you can see on the right, which is critical because the birth and death rates are equal in the large n limit. And so the theorem obtained by Félix, Emmanuel, and myself, it says the following: if Mn of k is the number of blocks of size k in pi n of t as t goes to infinity, so we look at the stationary state, and Mn is the total number of blocks. As I said, Mn of the square root of n converges to square root of 2c. And now if you look at Mn of k rescaled by the total number of blocks, it will converge to the law of the total progeny of a critical birth-death process, as I announced. And also what we've done, which is actually the major part of the paper, but I don't have time to enter the details, we can show, we can explicitly characterize the block frequencies of the projective limit of pi n of t as t goes to infinity. Actually, Julien Berestiki had a paper where one of the results or one of the consequences of his results was that this projective limit has infinitely many blocks and no dust. And the biological conclusion that you can draw from this theorem is that the total number of ancestral species contributing to the genome that you have sampled is quite large, right? It's square root of n. So meaning that if you have, let's say, 10 to the 4 genes, you have 100 species that have contributed on average, averaging on time on your to your genome. That's too much, and especially another thing that you see is that even the number of species that carry a very small number of lineages of your genes, Mn of k for k fixed, is of the order of square root of n. So you have many species carrying a very small number of gene lineages, and this is due to the fact that in this model we don't account for the fact that gene flow has to decrease as time goes and as separately evolving populations see, let's say, their co-adaptation decrease with time. And so in the third model, what I would like to do is try to introduce a way of taking this into account. So this is a little technical, so maybe, yeah, you can try to focus on the cartoons. So the third model is called the gene-based diversification model. So we use this notion of co-adaptation. And here it's a little more involved because, as I said earlier, we want to keep track of several gene trees. Okay, so we sample several genomes and we want to couple the ancestry of all the genes of all colors. So maybe forget about the text. We have two models, one forward in time, one backward in time. And actually, I must say that we have not proved that they are rigorously the dual from each other, but they have similar qualitative behaviors. So in the first model, we have this extinction recolonization type of events on the left, the forward time model. Where you start, here we're keeping track of one genome with several genes embodied by different colors. At some point in time, you see that the genome is replicated and copied into another population. And here, in addition to birth and death of populations and genomes, we have mutations. I don't know if you can see, the black dots embody mutations occurring on the lineages. And we assume the infinite many allele model that I introduced in the first lecture, meaning that every mutation gives rise to a new allele. And how do we keep the information about co-adaptation? We assume that a new allele arising in one genome, on one gene, is co-adapted with all the alleles that are present in that genome, but not with the alleles that are present in other genomes, okay? So for example, on the picture here, the new blue allele occurring on the right is co-adapted with all the rest of its genome, but it's not co-adapted with the red allele on the left, okay? Because the red allele on the left has occurred in another genomic background before the blue allele has arisen. In backward time, we don't want to keep track of mutations, and so what we decided is to say that because genes that are found in the same genome today cannot have spent too much time in the past in different species, because otherwise, if you look at the cartoon on the right, on the left, they would not be co-adapted and they could not be in the same genome because they would have accumulated too many mutations. Because of this conditioning, we assume that all the genes that are ancestral to the same genome are co-adapted. Okay, and we will use this notion of co-adaptation to construct the model. Okay, so for example, the blue lineage on the right is co-adapted with every lineage, at least the part on the top of the picture, because it is ancestral to the two genomes. Okay. And so in this paper that has appeared recently, thanks to the work of a very talented postdoc, Julie Marin, we have studied the models, and especially we have come up with an inference method, which I will not talk much about, but here I'm talking about probabilistic modeling, right? So let me show you the two models. So the model forward in time tells you that you have this extinction and recolonization of population, but also genomes accumulate mutations at rate alpha per lineage. As I said, the genomes replicate at rate beta. Each population is subject to genetic drift if you want something that I didn't really introduce, just meaning that the frequency of all the genomes can vary through time. If you want to have one single genome, you have to have gamma have very large values, so that the time scale of genetic drift is much more rapid than all the other time scales, and so you can neglect polymorphism and assume that all populations are monomorphic. And the nice thing here is that populations exchange genes at rate delta per lineage, meaning that each lineage can travel from one species to another. But before doing that, so it does that at rate delta. But before being accepted in the target genome, it tosses a coin with probability equal to the degree of co-adaptation, so the fraction of gene lineages that are co-adapted with the introgress gene. And so with this model, so we have only 4 parameters. As in the multispecies coalescent, it's neutral. There's no explicit modeling of physical linkage. But there is explicit modeling of the progressive loss of co-adaptation, resulting in a model that couples all the gene trees together and also couples gene trees with the progressive emergence of reproductive isolation. Okay? But of course, the problem is that this model is prohibitively slow for simulation or inference. And so we came up with this backward in time model, which, as I said, is not exactly the dual mathematically to the forward time model, but has some nice features. So the first thing that happens here, so you assume that you sample several genomes at present time on the bottom of the picture. And you follow, you trace back in time the history of the gene lineages. They can or cannot be in the same population. So the first thing that can happen is that your genes may change species, okay? It's called non-homologous attraction. And so we assume that each pair of lineage, so each gene lineage is attracted by all the other lineages in the system that are co-adapted with it, okay, at rate A. And this tunes the time scale of gene flow, because when A is large, all the gene lineages that are co-adapted will be attracted together, and all the genes will be sorted into just a few species containing many genes. At rate B, you will see homologous attraction, meaning genes of the same color, homologous genes, that are attracted together, which in a way drives the coalescence between species. And so this tunes the speed of reproductive isolation, because when B is large, we will have a short wait between speciations. Rate C is for coalescence, it's a dual to gamma. And rate D is erosion, allowing, as in the Kingman coalescent with erosion, allowing some gene lineages to leave their block and make their life alone as a singleton. And this tunes the number of populations exchanging genes, because when D is large, we will see many ancestral species. And so this model, actually, we checked. I can show you if you want, but the slide is after the acknowledgements. We have checked that this model had the same qualitative behavior as the forward in time model. But of course, it has several nice features because it's coalescent based, it's fast to simulate. It's plastic because we can incorporate any inhomogeneity in time of the rates. We can also assume that the rates are gene specific. and maybe in the future infer the specificity thanks to the data. It is sampling consistent, which is, as I repeated many times, a desirable property if you want to model the ancestry of a sample of genomes with n genes. You want that to be consistent in n. And now if you look at the ancestral configuration of one single genome, remember that we call that pi sub n of t. This has a law that is already well known. Why? So because we only consider one single genome here, we won't have any coalescence or any homologous attraction. So B and C will not come into play, only A and D. So recall the effect of non-homologous attraction means that for each pair of blocks with masses like containing J and K gene lineages respectively, at rate A times J times K, because of the attraction between co-adapted gene lineages, you will pass from 2 blocks with masses JK to 1 block with mass J minus 1 and a block with mass K plus 1. Okay, because just the gene has traveled from one block to the other. And an erosion has the effect of transforming a block with mass J into 2 blocks with mass J minus 1 and 1. Okay, the erosion means a singleton that leaves the block and forms its new block by itself. And this occurs at rate DJ. And these rates are exactly the rates of a Moran model with resampling rate A and mutation rate D. Okay, so at rate D per individual, you form a new block, and of course this removes one individual from the subpopulation of your type. And so, based on this, then the ancestral configuration to your sample genome has a stationary state, which is the same as the stationary state of the Moran model with mutation. And so it's given by E1 sampling formula with theta equal to D over A. And so what we get is a situation which is much more desirable than the situation we had in the Kingman coalescent with erosion, where the number of ancestral species at equilibrium to n genes is of the order of log n. Okay, so that's pretty small. It increases very slowly with the size of the genome, and so that's a good thing. There are few ancestral species containing a small number of genes, theta over k, not scaling with n. And also, as I said during lecture 1, this partition, so when you let n go to infinity, you look at the exchangeable partition into ancestral species, into blocks. It has no dust, and the block frequencies are given by the Poisson-Dirichlet distribution. And so the cartoon here is false because D equals 0, there is no dust. Okay, so we can characterize the ancestral state or at stationarity of this model, and we are currently working on trying to improve the method that. So I'm sorry, I don't have time to show you this, but we have an inference method that allows us to estimate the parameters of the model from, let's say, a bunch of gene trees, here just 14 on the right and 7 on the left gene trees. And the inference does good. Actually, yeah, I don't have time to detail these slides, but basically tells you that for at least for these data sets, gene flow is a much better explanation than incomplete lineage sorting due to the randomness of the coalescence process. And so we are working now with Céline Skornavaca from Montpellier and a PhD student called Guillaume Thomas on improving this method and try to infer now the evolutionary history of the genomes and not only the parameters of the model. And now I have 5 minutes to tell you a little bit more about the coming down from infinity of nested coalescence, coming back to a question of you, Ivan, during the first lecture about whether there was a shape theorem for the descent from infinity of the Kingman coalescent. The answer is actually no for the Kingman coalescent, because actually, so if you look at KT, the number of blocks in the Kingman coalescent, as I said, it comes down from infinity. So you can start with a partition into singletons, but you can show that kt for t small behaves like the solution to x dot equals minus x squared over 2. So the solution to that equation starting at infinity is 2 over t. And you can show that actually kt divided by x of t converges to 1 with probability 1. Okay, so there's no randomness, say, remaining in the limit for small time. But we will see that for nested coalescent, there is some randomness. And so what do I mean by this? So here, recall this picture of the Kingman in Kingman, the nested Kingman coalescent. And so imagine now that we start with infinitely many species, the pink part. So you have infinitely many, let's say, pink branches, and you want to know, let's say, how the number of genes descends from infinity. Okay, we know how the number of species descend from infinity, but of course the genes can only coalesce while they're in the same species. So you don't know, at least at first sight, how this number of genes descend from infinity. So the class of models that we will consider here is, let's say, lambda in Kingman. So the species tree is a Kingman coalescent, and the genes undergo lambda coalescence, right? So it's they're more simple than the nested coalescent that I showed during the first theorem, in the first theorem. So you have genes coalescing at rate c, provided they're in the same species, or emerging according to a lambda coalescent. And so there's a famous result due to the Berestiki brothers and Vlada Limic, saying to which condition the lambda coalescents do come down from infinity as the Kingman coalescent. So you need this function psi, which is a reminiscent, of course, of Levy processes, where you have this C for the Kingman part of the coalescent, and this measure lambda for the lambda coalescent part. And then the result says that the lambda coalescent comes down from infinity, CDI, if 1 over psi is integrable at infinity. And in that case, the number of lineages in the lambda coalescent behaves at small times like the solution to x dot equals minus psi of x, starting at infinity, right? So there is always, of course, one, because of this great condition, there is one unique solution to this equation starting at infinity. And still there's no shade theorem because there's no, at least for the number of blocks, there's no randomness remaining at small times. Of course, you could ask whether nested coalescents come down from infinity. Actually, it's not difficult to conclude that provided that the lambda coalescent of genes comes down from infinity by domination by the coalescent started at infinity, you will always have a finite number of gene lineages in each of the finite number of species lineages. So these nested coalescents also come down from infinity. How do they come down from infinity? Remember that in the simple coalescent, a few lines earlier, the speed is determined by the simple ODE with initial condition infinity. And we will see that for nested coalescents, the speed is determined by a generate PDE, arising some, it's like triggering some difficult problems of existence and uniqueness to these PDEs. So here are the PDEs that I will use in the next slide. So let me first introduce the transport equation with velocity minus psi. It's okay, so it's partial derivative of d with respect to t equal to this partial derivative with respect to x of psi times d, where d is the unknown and describes the evolution and is the concentration at time t sorry, let me start this again. So this equation describes the evolution of this unknown d of t and x, which is the concentration of particles with mass x at time t, where the mass of each particle spontaneously decreases as the solution to x dot equals minus psi of x. Okay, so you have to imagine that d, I didn't show you simulations, you have to imagine that d is some profile that travels from right to left as particles lose mass, right? So remember that psi of 0 equals 0, psi is increasing, and 1 over psi is integrable at infinity. And now the coagulation transport equation with velocity minus psi and coagulation rate A, where A is some function of time, is the same equation, but where you have added this convolution product. And this coagulation transport equation describes the evolution of the concentration of particles, which lose mass as in the ODE, but also gain mass by pairwise coagulation at rate A. Okay, so you draw, so you have pairs of, you have to imagine that you have an infinite amount of particles. Pairs of particles coalesce regardless of their masses, and so and their mass and the mass of the new particle is the sum of the two masses, and that's what this equation is supposed to model, right? Okay, so D star D is the convolution product. And so, of course, the problem of existence and uniqueness to this equation is not trivial. And what we've done is the following. So there are two results, but I only show you this main result when you start with an infinite number of species at zero, time zero. So you assume that S of t is the total number of species. It's just a Kingman coalescence. It's a pure death process. You let pi I of t be the number of genes that we call the mass of the ith species, and Gn of t is the empirical measure of these masses. Okay, so you imagine that you have these species that coalesce together, and you look at the distribution of genes, of number of genes into these species that you can define this way. You start with infinitely many species, and you don't have to specify. You will see that the result of this slide is that you don't need to specify the number of genes that you put initially in each of these species. You just have to assume that there is at least one gene. Then you know that, okay, the behavior at small time of S is basically 2 over T. It's the number of species undergoing the Kingman coalescence. And the result that we got with Emmanuel this year is that under these conditions, Gn at times T over N converges to the unique solution of the coagulation transport equation that I just showed you in the previous slide, such that there is some mass at initially in time, let's say above some threshold y, okay? So here, so we showed with various tools, including probabilistic tools and Makin-Vlasov type of solutions, that there is a unique solution to this equation. So you see that in each species, the number of genes is decreasing, like the solution to x dot equals minus psi of x. And you have this coagulation between a species that results in the coagulation term in the PDE. So the solution to this PDE is a PDE that starts at delta infinity and ends at delta 0, thanks to the transport and with coagulation going on the way. And note that the uniqueness of the solution holds under the sole condition that at time 0 there is some mass away from 0. Okay, and so it means that here you don't have to specify anything else, either in the probabilistic model or in the PDE limit. You don't have to specify anything about the initial condition. And it means that starting at infinitely many species does not require to tune the initial number of genes, and that species coalescences dominate the gene coalescences so as to generate some kind of universal initial condition. And actually, and that's my last slide. And actually, if you consider that, for example, say gamma equals 1 here, so psi of x is c x squared, and so you look at the nested Kingman coalescence, then you can prove that d at time t, the concentration of particles at time t, is the density of t to the minus 1 times upsilon, where upsilon is the random value with density d at time 1. And so you have this, let's let's say, universal decrease in each species. And if you recall that Gn of t is defined this way, then I am a little behind, so let me accelerate. So if you call rho of t the total number of genes, then you can show that actually rho of t goes down from infinity like 2 over t squared times some universal constant. And this constant was also computed numerically by the other authors of the paper that is mentioned on top of the slide. So here, the result is not so let's say, surprising, because you have of the order of 1 over t species at time t, of the order of 1 over t genes in each species at time t, and so you have of the order of 1 over t squared genes in total at time t. So let me finish this thanking all my collaborators, and in particular all the young people that I've had the luck to collaborate with, Jean-Gilles Duchamp, Chun Hama, Félix Foutel-Rodier, Julie Marin, and the co-supervisors, Guillaume Achaz and Emmanuel Scherzer, of course, who have done a lot of work, maybe most of the work that I presented today. And the SMILE group, and here are the references, some books and monographs, and the papers that I cited. I'm sorry, I'm really behind, sorry. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you very much. People should be able to unmute themselves, and if you want to join with me in thanking, let me make sure people can unmute themselves in a round of applause for Amare's lectures. So, well, we are over the time, so if people want to leave, that's fine. But if anybody has maybe a quick question, maybe it's hard to ask a quick question about such an interesting subject, but feel free to unmute yourself and ask it. And while people are thinking, let me just remind, so we will have a 1-week break, and then so 2 weeks from now, we will resume with 3 lectures delivered by Alison Etheridge, and you can find information for that on the website for the IICD. Any questions at this point?
I had a question, yeah. Hey, Amaury. In the peripheral isolate model, you made the assumption, it looked like, if I remember right, that when an isolate was formed, it was formed by a single haploid, lineage, yeah, and then grew somehow. And in other models, the other models you presented, you did not make an assumption like that one, right? In the erosion model, for instance, it looked like all individuals were immediately duplicated and formed a new lineage. I wonder if you could just talk about why you make those 2 different assumptions in models that are, at least superficially from a biological standpoint, pretty similar, and whether there's some reason, for doing it.
Yeah, thank you, John. So in model 2, the model with speciation with introgression, since we don't account for polymorphism, it's like we have one genome in each species, and we don't have to take into account the size of populations, and so in particular the allele frequencies. In the last model, which is more detailed, so also maybe one point that I can make is that in the first model, the model that you're detailing, actually the details of how this population grows from the founder individual to the total population size of the colony is not important, because in the limit we only have one single lineage at a time in each colony. So provided the time of growth is negligible with respect to, let's say, capital N, we don't have interference between, let's say, the process of turning from in to out or to out to in. or the resampling inside, or the coalescences inside the main population.
But if you you noted that you didn't have a kind of a well justified way to proceed with an actual model of speciation in that model, where things would become kind of non-equilibrium at some point and generate new species.
Yeah.
If you were to do that, where you end up with two peripheral isolate entities, if one of them ultimately traced back to one isolation event from the other species, then all lineages would have to coalesce, when they got back to the speciation event. But that wouldn't really fit what people observe in DNA, right? So if you were to build that model into one with a speciation process, I think it might have to have some different assumptions that would allow multiple lines to go through speciation events.
Yeah, sure, exactly. But actually, I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to make some of these spontaneously emerging colonies become maybe one new main population surrounded by colony in a way that is realistic, and that does not, like, for example, trigger like a whole wealth of new species at the same time, or where you can, as you said, where you don't have too many like lineages intermingled between too many species. Like all these colonies, they should, at least at the first approximation, each colony should be belonging to one single main population, or you have maybe this transient period during which colonies may belong to several main populations. But but if you have ideas, I would be interested.
I'll think about it. Thank you.
Very much.
I have a question regarding the interaction of, let's say, what you mentioned as putative, features in the coalescing trees, if they are facilitated by polymorphia, or if there is any interrelation between the ability to have a polymorphia scenario and a putative involving tree, whether it's nested or not nested.
Can you tell me which picture or which slide you're thinking about?
These two different slices. In the beginning, you mentioned about the putative. I think it's in the one of the first coalescing trees, and then later on there is the polymorphia as a feature where I can assume, or I'm trying to think, that polymorphia is a factor in maybe species interaction on coalescing.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you very well, so I'm not sure I understand when you say what do you mean by polymorphia?
Maybe I'll suggest, because I also actually need to sign up. Maybe this is a good conversation to take offline.
Okay.
Let's all thank Omar again for an excellent series of 3 lectures.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I certainly learned a lot, and I have a set of notes of things I need to read. I'm sure others as well. So thank you, Omar, and you have about 2.5 hours to go out to eat before you need to go.
Not enough for a French person.
Have a good evening. All right, thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you for organizing, Sophie and Ivan.
Sure.
My pleasure.
I don't know if the person who was asking the question is still here. No.